do feel somewhat vindicated. That's exactly what I was suggesting would be the case at the time. And that was the advice that came out of the Minister's office at the time as well. But look, as it stands, I think it's great. I think it's a good framework. So, people wanting to invest and people wanting to develop in the city have that understanding about, how to best go about contributing to public art in this manner. So look, I'm happy to support it.
Alderman, Bisco. Did you want to go next?
Oh, I did allow but I'll allow
Alderman Zuko was next.
So I let the Greek go and I let the Aussie go.
All right, and then Alderman Zuko will be next.
Australia being a longest living culture, beats Greece and Italy by centuries, by thousands of years. Right, thank you. Look, I did make this comment in committee, but I think it's worth repeating that the university is one major investor in the city in buildings and that, and I think we should be passing, if it passes tonight, a special copy of this plan to the Vice Chancellor with a note noting that you are investing heavily in the city. I hope you take this in mind when you are doing your developments. And I think because they've got the art school, I think they would be wise for them to do it as well. But I think Hobart's quite proud, should be proud of a lot of publicly provided art if you walk around the city. In the 60s and 70s, even the banks were contributing public artwork. We know that state government, a certain percentage of the cost of a build has to go to artwork. So all I can say is to make our city livable, and although modern art, a lot of modern art I don't enjoy, especially the temporary pop-up art which has no meaning to me, but I do believe that sculpture and mosaics and a lot of visual arts do, and I imagine if a building developer such as putting mosaics on buildings, like I know a private developer has done that up in, Argyle Street, or and I don't think they were prompted by the city at all. It was just making their building look better and more approachable, more human. So all I can say is I think this is a good step. It's not compulsory, but we should be encouraging.
Yes, Mayor, just on what Alderman Barakis was talking about, I think I sort of mentioned the same thing about the art tax through you to the General Manager. I just want to confirm that the Hobart City Council cannot impose an art tax. Is that correct or incorrect? I just want to make it clarify.
Well, thank you, Lord Mayor. The legal advice we received from an eminent planning lawyer said that we did not have the head of power to impose that.
Isn't that great? Actually, I do want to make some reference to a couple of points made by the Deputy about developers contributing to our city. Developers sometimes are thrown upon the basis that they are seen as all these people that just want to come into our city and make money. But what we fail to understand is, what do they do to our city when they provide us housing and apartments and accommodation and all the things a city does need to be a vibrant place? Most recently, after many years of arguing to see shop top development, we redeveloped the Kodak building in the CBD. Now, do we have to force these developers? If we had an art tax, we would have forced that developer to contribute to some art into the city, but the contribution that is going to do to the city, to my point of view, far outweighs what potentially some artwork could do. We look at what's been happening around our, in North Hobart, there's been some redevelopments and one sold in a week. Apartments that this city needs. We talk about inner city living. I've been talking about inner city living for years. And the only person who remember this, we went on a study tour of Sydney and also Melbourne with the late Doom Kennedy, and Alderman Briscoe was on that trip. We looked at the inner city developments that Sydney and Melbourne were doing. And we've been lagging because it's only in recent times we've seen it happen. We need more inner city living, because the more inner city living that you have, hopefully it reduces the cost factors to some people that can't afford. I am talking about public art and look, I was interfered with, but anyway, I'll explain no, you're always interfering, Councillor Harvey, but I'll explain. There was the point made, and I wasn't being detrimental to the deputy, about developers contributing to the city. They do contribute to the city, even if they don't contribute to public art, but developers can also contribute to the city in many other ways, like laneways and a number of other aspects that they can do. Because I was one of those developers in North Hobart prior to being on council in 1991, where I had to contribute to, well, whether you call it artwork, but I had to contribute to paving outside of my building in North Hobart, which, mind you, years later was taken up and I've taken back up, but also an umbrella and a place for people to sit. So, that's already part of it. Using it as a guide only, as the legalities say there, I just question, why do we need a policy? And I say this in this way because I think Alderman Thomas raised a very important point, is if we've got a policy that it's seen to a guide only, and we have a developer who says, okay, I want to try, and I'm not being detrimental to any elected member, but I want to try and get Alderman Thomas over the line here, but I'm going to contribute some artwork to this particular project. Do I think I'm going to get Alderman Thomas over the line? So we need to consider those factors. Is the developer doing it for the benefit of the city, or is the developer doing it for the benefit of themselves to get the development over the line? So Alderman Thomas's point is very, very valid, and that was one thing that was in the back of my mind at all times. So, look, even though I support the crux of this particular proposal, I have concerns about having a guide to any developer who will look at it and say, well, I'm going to get this development over the line, and I'm not asking anyone to palm my hand or anything like that, if I deliver this artwork to the city. So I'm asking the elected members to give consideration to this. I'm not going to move a deferral, but I'm not going to vote for it because I have concerns that it could make some developers think about how they approach their development applications.
Further discussion, Alderman Harvey.
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. I'm just refreshing my mind about the public art framework, which we signed off in 2019. It's a really beautiful document about how we improve public art in Hobart, about how we encourage it, how we find the right artists, and also look at the ways we can help fund public art in Hobart that everybody benefits from. And during that process, one of the recommendations was that we investigate looking at some funding from developers as a contribution to public art, and that's where this motion has come from, or where this report has come from. We went off and investigated that. At the time, I do remember a couple of the aldermen saying, oh, you can't do this, it's a tax, but we didn't have the report that verified that. We just had the opinions, and those opinions were correct, and now we have a report that tells us that we couldn't impose a fee or a percentage on the developers. Other cities around the world, as the Deputy Mayor has said, have programs where there's a compulsory contribution basically from developers. So we can't do that in Tasmania or in Hobart, but I'd still like to think that developers off their own bat would be prepared to contribute to the public art that makes the city what it is. And we know that public art is underfunded. We know that artists are struggling, and to have a system and to have a policy and a strategy that encourages public art and that improves public art in Hobart and that supports a sector that gives so much to the public. And often they're they're not rewarded for the work they do substantially. So I'm really keen to think that this document that we have here, which is a private development guide, will show the way for developers, if they choose, to get involved in public art in Hobart. And this is the process for how they can do that, rather than not know what the pathway is to get involved in public art. And I think there will be some generous people who are interested in being part of the public art program in Hobart, and this is a good guiding document. And I don't have the concerns that this is about a quid pro quo or anything like that. I think this is just good public art policy, to have some guiding policy that anyone can look to and help them decide if they want to contribute to public art in Hobart that we all benefit from, as well as the developers. So I'm supportive of the motion.
Can I ask a question,
Alderman
Lord Mayor?
Thomas, yes.
I wonder whether it might be possible, and I don't know whether anyone who hasn't spoken might consider it, by using the word, question whether or not we could remove the word private developers from it, because there's philanthropists and other people who leave wills and do all sorts of things. And my question is, can we replace those words?
Sorry, Lord Mayor, can I just answer the question? If we go back to the public art framework, there was a series of things that we wanted to look at. And philanthropy is one way, and it's a sector. And then there's the developers of Hobart, who are another sector. And I think this is, sort of compartmentalising it. And anyone who wants to contribute to public art in Hobart is welcome. And our people that work in the office, in the public art space, are really clued in to how they can help people. And their doors are always open for anyone who wants to contribute to public art. So I understand your point, but I don't think there's a need to make it generic.
Okay, any further discussion? Councillor Coates or Councillor Dutta? Oh, I think Councillor Coates did put up his hand first, so I'm sorry. But
I don't mind if you want to go.
you need to stand, so, yeah.
I think, look, I won't speak very quickly on it. I guess it gives me great comfort to hear from the director that this is something that will be a handy document for them, because they're already fielding questions in regards to this. And look, I think very important that we're not trying to, slog developers for some extra dosh. I mean, we don't want to add cost to development. We've already got a lot of undeveloped sites and a sense, if you like, but it's a little bit too hard in Hobart. But I just want to touch on a point, which is, cost is what you pay, value is what you get. Any developer that's not trying to make their whatever it is they're doing beautiful and of high amenities is mad. They spend every day trying to get the best value for their money to make the most appealing precinct and the most appealing building and development, so that ultimately more people want to go there and use it and rent it and what have you. And look, as I look around the city, I mean, some of the best things that I think are done really smart aren't necessarily expensive, but it's great that we can invite people to have a think about what they can do to contribute. I mean, those little power boxes you see, the one I'm thinking of in mind is outside Post Street Social, where, rather than just a grey power box, they've actually painted it. Got like a little girl on it, and you think, what a brilliant piece of public art. It's turned what was a box into a piece of canvas, and it sort of looks quite cool. And that's the sort of things where hopefully this document, having it, another little tool in the armoury to make them think. But obviously it's very supportive, but it's only advice. It doesn't compel anyone to spend money, and we're not going to go down this race of either taxing them, or if we're not going to tax them, saying, oh well, 10 grand projects, nice, but wouldn't it be great if you could do a $200,000 project? That might get through for a vote, and the fears that have been raised and discussed. So look, I for one think it's a good idea, but we should ultimately trust them. People are going to build beautiful buildings because they want them to be appealing, and I think this hopefully will just add to that.
Councillor Dutta?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want to, listening to the various points, contextualize this. I remember very clearly the heated debate. And for me, debate to be heated is healthy. And we've had many heated debates, not only on this particular matter, but a number of different matters. To attack the points is very mature, but not to attack the person. I think it's a very important thing to have. In that particular debate, for me, it was a diversity of ideas. And it's all about diversity of ideas. We have diversity of races. We talk about Italians, we talk about Greeks, we talk about Indians, Fijians, Australians. But for me, it's not the diversity of races, but it's the diversity of ideas that we bring to this chamber to debate. At the end of it, it is important for us. The difference of that particular night was there were two varying differences of opinion, and we wanted to test that and be guided by legal opinion. And it was given to us, and we have done that many a time. And so I'm very glad, and I'm wanting to support this. I think very important to support this, as it's only a guide, but at the same time, in the planning scheme, there is that provision. And if it is that provision and we have a discretion that we can use, I'm quite happy to support this particular guide. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? No further discussion. I think I will say a few words. Yeah, I guess talking about diversity of ideas, I am going to vote for this, but I'm also going to express my disappointment. I'm going to express my disappointment in the Tasmanian legal process because I think we really do have to sort out the issue around developer contributions for public infrastructure, including public art. You know, it's the same sort of legal advice we got back a few years ago about contributions to affordable housing, and that wouldn't be allowed under the planning scheme as well. And I had a field trip down to visit Mary at Macquarie Point Corporation, and she was saying that they're planning to get contributions from developers in their precinct into the public art space areas of their precinct. Now, the question is, how on earth will they be able to do that if this law applies to everybody in Tasmania? So I'd be really interested, and I will stay in touch with Mac Point to see how they're planning to do that, because this is normal practice around the world. And I'd like to find out from Mac Point how they're planning to get around this sort of Tasmanian ruling. I also noted on social media that someone was suggesting on Facebook that a public art levy is socialism. And I'd just like to draw everyone's attention to those red raggers at the Liberal Party-dominated council in Brisbane, which requires a 0.25% contribution for art on all new developments over $5 million in the CBD. Now that law, that levy, that requirement on developers over a certain size has been in place for 25 years. This is the largest, most successful Liberal-dominated council in the country. So, look, I will support it, but I just think we've got to stay in touch with what's happening around the world and around Australia, and the whole area around developer contributions is quite sophisticated. It is very much something that developers themselves are identifying that they'd rather know about it than have to guess. They'd prefer mandatory requirements as is in place in many, many cities around Australia, not just the world, around Australia. But we've got to have an orderly system, and running off and having to get legal advice every time we sort of want to basically do what is happening in every other capital city is not an orderly system. And I would like to see us, if our state laws are behind the times, I would like to see us keeping in touch with contemporary development practice around Australia, and I'll certainly personally be keeping a very close eye on this issue. Thank you. Deputy Lord Mayor, would you like to sum up?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. I think there has been some good debate around this and good points from both sides, really, in relation to this. I mean, this is noted, as Part 2 suggests, this is noted as one way a developer might contribute to the public amenity of the city. As you say, Lord Mayor, it's not mandated. But I think one of the important points that I hadn't considered that Councillor Harvey raised is that the benefits are not only to the developer because it's going to improve the streetscape or that interface with the city. It's going to improve it for our community, our ratepayers and visitors to the city, but it also supports artists and our arts community, who are doing it really tough now, as we know, with COVID, but it's an important consideration. So I believe that our staff will be providing a really frank and fearless advice on public art and how we can do this better. And whilst it's not mandated, I hope that it is taken up because people will see the benefits to not only their building but also our community.
Okay, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. That's passed unanimously. Item 11.
Lord Mayor, I move the monthly building and planning statistics from the 1st to the 31st of October.
Second by Councillor Harvey.
And as you can see, this is for receiving and noting, but there is a good mix of continued development on that sort of single houses, extensions and alterations to dwellings. There have been 6 new dwellings to the value of over $3 million and 2 major projects, and it tracks pretty well with what we were doing this time last year. So moved.
Any discussion? No discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. It's passed unanimously. Item 12.
Yes, Lord Mayor, this is in relation to the Urban Design Advisory Panel membership. So I'll move the item.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
Lord Mayor, we had, as you're aware, we put out for advertising the new members for the Urban Design Advisory Panel. Our chair and former alderman architect Jameson Allen was leaving, so we needed replacements, and so we had quite an uptake and interest in relation to membership of this from academics, from architects and so forth when we re-advertise this, and the quality of all applications was astounding, I think. So it's really good to know that there is professional interest in membership of the Urban Design Advisory Panel. What we have before us is a choice of between Scott Barnforth and Helen Norrie for chair or academic representative. But we've also decided that we're recommending from committee to council that we appoint 2 members with both planning and urban design experience. So those 2 would be Ian James, who's currently on the committee. I think Ian has some heritage and general planning expertise, as well as Lee Woolley to join the advisory panel. We have representatives from the Institute of Architects and Landscape Architects, as well as proxies, so that if anybody has to step out of the room, we have enough of the committee to be there. And the last point is for you, Lord Mayor, to write formally on behalf of the council to Peter Curtis as chair and Jameson Allen as, for their contribution. And I'd like also to have on the record that I really appreciated the work in particular that Peter has done as chair. I think it's really a credit to him in chairing the Urban Design Advisory Panel, but also how he has made that contribution, which not only helps us in our decision making, helps the planners and also the applicants as well.
Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Now we have to make a choice. So I'm suggesting for part 1 that it's a little 1, so it's got Bamsfield as chair. Bamsforth? Barnforth, sorry about that. It was spelled incorrectly previously, but it's spelled correctly there now. And for 3, Helen Norrie. Got that right, I think? Look,
That's an amendment, Alderman Briscoe.
no, we have to choose between the 2, so I'm suggesting that.
Yeah, it's an amendment that
Oh,
you're
it's an
proposing
amendment,
that.
is it?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
Yeah.
Now,
And that's been seconded by Alderman.
Happy to second the
No, it's been seconded by Alderman. Councillor Dutta.
right, I thank you. That makes it so much easier because I don't think there'll be too much debate then. All I'd like to say is the quality of the CVs, as the Deputy has pointed out, outstanding. It shows the talent we've got in the city, and people putting up their hands outside sometimes their busy practice or their busy academic work to serve on this committee. I think it's sad that we see Peter Curtis leaving, but his contribution to the city as the Director of Planning and then moved on when he retired to chair this committee. But Jameson Allen would have given the perspective of an elected member because he was an elected member for one term. I think after one term he would have been re-elected, but he decided his interests were elsewhere. Elected member needs special qualities, as we all know, and he was. And I imagine, I remember some of the debates where he got it right, but the council got it wrong, and he was often the only person voting against a particular development, and we got it wrong. And there's only a few of those. I think most of the time the council we've made the right decision. But anyway, those two, we have got their CVs on the open part of the planning committee, although it was discussed in the close. So I don't think we need to dwell on it too much. There was a good discussion at the committee.
Thank you. Further discussion? No further discussion? Okay, well, I'm going to put the amendment to start with. So all those in favour of the amendment proposed by Alderman Briscoe? Aye. Against say no. It's passed unanimously. And Deputy Lord Mayor, did you want to sum up at all? So on the substantive motion, with that amendment in place, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Okay, moving on to item 13. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yes, Lord Mayor, I'd like to rise to move that we endorse the Sustainable Hobart Action Plan 2025, including Community Engagement Report.
I think Alderman Thomas had his hand up first, yeah.
Lord Mayor, this is a really important document which has had many months, if not years, in the making to get to this point. It's entitled Sustainable Hobart Action Plan Towards a Zero Emissions Hobart. And it looks at various ways that our city can move to become more sustainable, move in the direction that we've already moved over a number of years, for many years, and to continue our leadership in this space, to help guide other councils and other jurisdictions, our community, in relation to becoming more sustainable. The action plan, or the strategy, the action plan is based on very much on the community vision, the vision that the community has told us, which really looks at looking to the future, looking at climate change, and looking how we may make sure that our city and community is reducing greenhouse gas emissions where possible, and acting on various other things. It introduces targets, so there are 3 main targets that we're looking at in this action plan, which is the corporate greenhouse gas target. So we're building on what we've already done to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and we want to be doing that by 2030 by a further 20%. The second target is that the Hobart greenhouse, that we work with the Hobart community to nominate a greenhouse gas target by 2022, and we're going to get further information back in relation to that from the staff working with the community. And thirdly, the renewable energy target for 2040, which is that the City of Hobart will achieve 100% net renewable electricity by 2040. So quite bold, and some may say they're aspirational targets, but not so much aspirational as what we are managing to do as business as usual across the organisation. So embedded in this plan is quite a stepping up, if you like, to ensure that some of these targets are business as usual, are things that we're doing across our organisation. So I wholeheartedly endorse this project. I mean, it's not a completely finished thing. There is always more work to be done, but I commend the work that the office, the council staff has done to get to this point in relation to this document.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Lord Mayor, and thanks, Deputy, for the introduction. Lord Mayor, I'd like to start off with some words from Sophie Muller, the Director of the Climate Change Office, who has a quote in the report: "The Paris Agreement recognises the important role of subnational governments in addressing climate change. It's fantastic to see the City of Hobart have such a comprehensive plan for action that complements the work of the Tasmanian Government." So I'm pleased that the work that the officers have done in consultation with the people of Hobart aligns with the Climate Change Office, which is the state department. I'm also pleased that it also aligns with some of the work that the Tas Networks Transformation Roadmap 2025 talks about. And in this document, which has been out for a couple of years, there's mention of an encouragement towards distributed energy networks. It's recognised across Australia that the future of energy is changing enormously, that new technology is arriving all the time. So Tas Networks is aware of that, and they've included the potential for distributed energy networks and the desire for that in their transformation roadmap. They've also talked about harnessing new technology, and I think that's an important thing that we're exploring in our Sustainable Hobart strategy with our team who are driving this thing. So a third part that I'd like to refer to from Tas Networks is that they're looking at 2 significant microgrids in Tasmania at some point in the future between now and 2025. They've already done that pilot on Bruny Island, where they had a battery solar system. I think it went out, I think there were 60 installations created that helped flatten out the load of electricity through the cable across the Bruny Island. So I try to say Bruny Island at the start. Yeah, Bruny Island. So that Bruny Island project was a good pilot to understand how these things work. And they're also looking at 2 significant microgrids in the next 5 years. So that's an exciting proposition that we don't know, who will get the opportunity. But I'd like to think, because of Hobart's proactive approach to how we handle sustainability, we might be in the mix. It's something that we will consider, in the fullness of time. But I'd also like to focus on what's come out just recently. It was only last week, and that's the State of the Climate 2020. And this is the document that's released every 2 years from the Bureau of Meteorology and CSIRO. And it makes for really sobering reading about what the future holds. And I've got to mention also that the BOM is the most respected organisation in Australia, along with CSIRO. Their scientists and their research and their data is world class. And one of the authors of this is actually from CSIRO in Hobart, Dr. Brown. But some of the things mentioned in this, and I'm sure we all know because we all have multiple sources of information, Australia's climate has warmed on average 1.44 plus or minus 0.24 since national records began in 2010, leading to an increase in the frequency of extreme heat events. In South East Australia, there's been a decline of around 12% in April to October rainfall since the late 90s. But all records are being broken all the time. The most frequent heat wave days occurred in 2019, the hottest year on record. So all of these things are changing. So it's really important, and there's a huge community expectation that we do what we're doing, which is put together a sustainable Hobart action plan. The community expectation is that we will do this, that we will continue to look at how we improve the city. So I'm really pleased to finally see this document come before council. It's a very good document. It's got 40 actions that, as Alderman Briscoe said before, they're all achievable. It's not going to cost us a fortune to do this. A lot of things are operational and they're already ongoing to some degree, but there's a lot of things we can continue to do as a council, and also working with the community I think is really important as well. So I'm pleased to see that target that will be established working with the community into the future. So I'm really positive about the document tonight, and I recommend it to everybody, and I hope we can get a unanimous decision to support it tonight. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Further discussion? Any comments, further discussion?
Yeah, Lord Mayor, thank you. I just want to make 3 points. Most of the points have been made, but I think for me, the pattern of climate change is something which is very, very important, not only for us here, but globally. So the pattern of climate change shifts us to a paradigm shift, which is really required and needed. And for me, this document does that. And it takes into account a number of principles. So I would totally support this. Thank you.
Further discussion? Okay, no, I'll just say a few words because I think it is a really important strategy, and I know it's one that's sort of been a little bit in the making since about 2017. So, but you know, really in earnest, a lot of work's been put in the last year, and I want to acknowledge all of the work that the staff have done, both in coming up with lots of programs, lots of internal discussions, because this really does bring together a whole range of actions in a range of departments, and that's so important for this kind of strategy. But then also consulting with a range of stakeholders, including the Tasmanian Government and other organisations, and all of the community. So very thankful for that work. And just to say that, yes, you know, we are in the race of our lives, and that is the race to try and tackle climate change. We've already identified it as our biggest threat to the city, and we know that our actions in this plan and our actions in this city won't save us from, you know, the threats that climate change poses. But we have to be part of the solution. We can't sort of ask others the federal government and others to do things if we're not prepared to work ourselves. Plus our own community is looking for us to be proactive as well. But I think there's another important element to this, which is the positivity of being seen as a sustainable city. And I'm conscious of our other capital city cousins, and I've looked at all their websites recently, and they're all aiming to be Australia's cleanest, greenest, most sustainable city. So Brisbane and Adelaide and Sydney and Canberra, they've all got this sort of goal of, you know, we want to be the cleanest, greenest, most sustainable. And the reason is because modern cities, you know, do recognise that to have a bold and ambitious climate change sustainability plan is good for what it says about their city. It says about their city that they're innovative, that they're future thinking, that they're a great place to invest, and you know, this is why it's really important that we do pull together what we're doing and tell the world about it. I think it was the Harvard, and it is becoming core business. The Harvard Business Review recently wrote about how companies and cities need to have a plan to move to zero emissions or risk their business or their city's sustainability. They also pointed to directors' responsibilities to have a climate plan and investment or see things become stranded assets. So the cities and companies are realising that to be a responsible city, to be an innovative city, to be a modern city, to be a competitive city is also to be a sustainable zero carbon city. So you know, this is very much about an environmental goal and trying to achieve lots of environmental things, but it's also really smart city business strategy. So thank you, everyone. Deputy Lord Mayor, did you want to
No,
sum
thank
up?
you, Lord Mayor.
Okay, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Then say no.
No.
A show of hands, all those in favour.
Alderman Sexton, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Coates, Councillor Ewan, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
Against?
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Barakis.
So, Lord Mayor, it's carried 10 votes to 2.
So, item 14, Alderman. Oh, thank you, Alderman. Alderman Zuko.
Yes, Lord Mayor, this is electric vehicle charging station and pricing. I so move.
Seconded by Councillor Dutta.
Just very briefly, it's a park and charge fee of $20 per hour, or part thereof. I think it's a very good initiative, and I commend it to council.
Any discussion, Alderman Briscoe?
Yes, look, it concerned me that there was some talk of making it free, and I thought that as an equity issue, where these electric cars are still very expensive to the general population, and so therefore you have to have a fair bit of money to buy one of them, and we were going to give the electricity charge for free, and I thought that was a wrong message. They are going to save money in the long run through other costs, someone who has an electric vehicle, but I think they have to pay for the cost of us supplying it. It seems to me, I have no knowledge of how long it takes to recharge. Perhaps that question I could ask. How long does it take to recharge?
Through you, Lord Mayor, over the first couple of months, the average has been about 17 minutes.
So they're not going to pay very much, and presumably they'll have a 200 or 300 kilometre range for some of these cars. So it is probably, that could be an incentive, whilst they're paying for the electricity that we supply for their own personal use, it's actually going to save them money if they don't have to buy petrol.
Alderman Thomas?
Yeah, look, it's not for tonight, but I do herald the fact that somewhere along the line, somewhere in this country, we're going to have to try to incentivise the take-up of electric vehicles. Quite right, as Alderman Briscoe said, it's an expensive item of equipment, but we're variously regaled with stories that the South Australian and New South Wales government are seeking to recover road user charges because the fuel excise will be down. And yes, we're giving away $5 or $6. We would have been giving away $5 or $6 if we were going to charge nothing or just simply charge for the parking. But somewhere along the line, we're going to have to consider, as a levels of government, necessarily only this level, what we're going to do to incentivise the take-up of electric cars. They're not going to come magically. They might come magically in London when in 2030, if he's still around, Boris says he's not going to register any petrol cars. But what are we doing? We're charging, in some cases the smaller ones a bit cheaper, but we're charging a lot of money to ask someone to convert to electric vehicles. We're getting this charging station, I understand, for free, which is great for the state government, so they're doing their bit, and it's not going to come back to them in any excise or any special coverage. But we're kidding ourselves if the community is going to take up electric vehicle usage when, unless Councillor Harvey can let me know, he'll know if anyone does, what are the incentives, what are the plans to incentivise the take-up of this form of vehicle? I mean, we're kidding ourselves. We're charged almost double. We'll give them nothing, and my colleague on my left is saying, thank heavens, we're not giving this away. I mean, when do we start recognising the environmental impact of someone taking, I mean, I know the batteries cost money and the batteries cost money to dispose, etc. But we're going to have to take this issue up, and sooner rather than later, I suggest.
I think Alderman Barakis did pop his hand up, so I'll let him go first.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and look, I'll be supporting this. I think just to respond to Alderman Thomas, or perhaps, I don't know, alleviate his concerns, I think I'll attempt it. My understanding of, and having some brief Google searching to educate myself on it, and I'm happy to be corrected, I think is that the majority of modern EV cars can be, over 75% of the charge in less than an hour. I think it's something like that. They can charge quite quickly with the fast charging, and as we've got in Dunn Place. For us to charge, $20 per an hour, and the average time was 17 minutes. Effectively, most cars would be charged, well and truly charged in an hour, in $20. For a petrol car to fill their tank up, for the equivalent, you're looking at 50, 60, possibly, depending on the car, you're looking at, sedans, $70, $80 for a tank of petrol. So I think we need to have something that, as you say, is incentivising new technology such as EV cars. But at the same time, it has to be done in a way that's sustainable from a cost perspective from the council and maintains our responsibility to the ratepayer. But if we can do that, charging what's being suggested to us here, and also have, the equivalent of maybe a third of the cost of the equivalent of a tank of petrol, I think that is an incentive to move. Because I'd say, look, as it stands, I think EV cars are more expensive to buy, but if the weekly cost of topping it up, I'd say refueling is probably the wrong word, but the weekly cost of topping that up, if that's in the order of a quarter or a fifth or a third of what it would cost to fill up a tank of petrol in an equivalent car, in a couple of years you're going to find that cost recovered. So I think what this is much cheaper than the equivalent petrol car, and it's done so in a way that the council is not leaving the ratepayer out of pocket paying for it as well. So I think it does meet that balance, and that's why I'd be supporting this.
Well, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. So I'll just refer to that document again from Tas Networks. So in 2018, there were only 200 electric vehicles in Tasmania, and they're predicting that by 2025 it'll be somewhere between 4,000 and 14,000. So they're expecting a huge growth in electric vehicles, and I think that 200 figure's probably doubled since 2018 or increased significantly. But if we're talking about incentives, then look no further than the ACT. The ACT are now offering $15,000 no-interest loans towards electric cars, 2 years free registration, and they're rolling out car parks with charging stations and solar panelled roofs and all the rest of it. But the ACT are much bigger government than the City of Hobart. So if we're keen to roll out or see an acceleration in electric cars, and I think this is probably covered under our Sustainable Hobart strategy as advocating for better and sharper technologies, then we need to be talking with the state government. So I'm not going to move an amendment to say let's lobby, because we've done that 1,000 times. We've got a drawer full of letters. But I think we've already got it covered to some degree in the Sustainable Hobart Action Plan, where it talks about that advocacy for other things. Could I just get a comment from Mr. Carr?
Through you, Lord Mayor, there's a couple of initiatives in the action plan which deal directly with the mode shift, both towards smaller electric mobility options, but also to electric vehicles and infrastructure.
Okay. And just with regard to the pricing of this, I don't think this will push people away from electric cars at this point. We heard that it takes, well, so far the data from that 50 kilowatt charger in Dunn Place, the average car stay time is 17 minutes, did you say? So that's 17 minutes out of $20. What's that? Do the maths. Not much. Yep. So it's pretty affordable at the moment. And I dare say once this sort of infrastructure is common, and we see the death of the garage, petrol Bowsers will be a thing of the past in not too distant future, and we'll have electric chargers all over the place. And I anticipate, all the fleet downstairs in a few years, you'll see electric cars, and the price will come down. The fleets will be purchased. They will become the second-hand electric car market, and suddenly, prices will decline significantly. And we're already seeing that. You can buy an electric car now, only a couple of years old, for around $20,000 if you're looking to purchase one, with some of the schemes that are now operating, moving second-hand cars. So it's a big deal that electric cars are coming over the horizon. We need to be understanding of it, and we need to be ready for it. So our first fast charger will be one of many, I dare say, into the future. But I'd also like to emphasise that it's important that we have a good relationship with Tas Networks, because we need to be talking to them all the time about where can you put these sorts of bits of infrastructure. So our relationship with Tas Networks, I anticipate, will be very strong into the future, because we need to know how the grid works. And as new technologies and as opportunities to do more things, and that's community focused as well as industry, as well as business, as well as commercial buildings, you know, there's a big shift that's going to happen with regard to energy. Electric cars is just one thing, but there'll be all sorts of other opportunities for this council and for, you know, commerce and industry and business in Tasmania to support a new way of looking at energy and the way we use it with batteries and solar and all the rest of it.
Councillor Harvey, it's $5.66. Thank you.
Councillor Coates.
Yeah, speak briefly on this one. Supporting of it. I think it's really important for one reason. I think Councillor Harvey's touched on this, but you know, we know that there's more electric vehicles on the road now than there were 2 years ago. There's probably, although we don't know, going to be more electric vehicles in 2 more years. I think this is a very important change, if you like, to the policy setting to charge this fee, because ultimately it will form part of the business case. Because at some point we may need to be looking in the future and going, well, how many more of these do we install? How often are they used, and what are people willing to pay for them? You know, and it's all very well to go, oh, it's really popular, people using it when it's free. Well, of course it is, but you know, I think we heard in the committee, director may be able to correct me on this, but it's about a 3-year payback on this setting, just on the physical infrastructure cost of getting it in there. You know, we might be able to afford to do 1 or 2, but if we're being asked to do hundreds, if that's the demand and the need in the future, we need to know that people are actually going to use it, because ultimately they've still got the option of charging at home. So I think it is critical that we do charge this fee. From an equity point of view, it's still good value, as we've heard from the owner of the vehicle, still cheaper than what it would be if it was petrol. But, you know, ultimately for us as a city, we can't continue to provide this service for free, and it does, if you like, form a very good real-life example to give us the data to make, hopefully, what is a better decision down in the future. And I'm reminded, you know, growing up, mainly we had water restrictions all the time. You know, if they set a quota and said, oh, it's free, but you're only allowed to use so much, everyone managed to use that much water. You know, you'd be watering your garden to a certain amount, whatever. The second they said, oh, well, you know, you can use your water, but be aware there's going to be a charge on usage, you know, the pricing signal does work. So I, for one, look forward to seeing what the impact of this will be, and hopefully that'll form good information that we can use going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Coates. Alderman Brack.
Just a question, Lord Mayor, through to the director, and it's more one just for my own education. The average 17 minutes that people were charging at that bay for, do we have any data on what percentage that was charging the cars up? Like how much of a tank were they getting out of that?
Through you, Lord Mayor, might have to take that one on notice. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yeah, I want to sum up, Lord Mayor, because there were some interesting things said, Lord Mayor, in particular by Councillor Harvey, in the sense of our fleet downstairs. I think he was referring to the General Manager, but hopefully he was referring to each and every elected member. Over the next couple of years, we can see everyone with a new electric vehicle. You won't be seeing me. I just bought a brand new car, so I'm 4 years off before buying an electric car. So no doubt can't wait to see Councillor Harvey's electric car downstairs.
$77,000 for a new electric Merc.
Yeah, well, I'm just going on, you know, the downstairs. Hopefully it wasn't just referred to the staff. You know, we are the elected members. We're the ones that deliver, and I think we should be showing and leading by example as well. As far as you know, the mention about the you know, whether it's free or we're going to charge. Could we imagine if we had a petrol Bowser and we decided to pump free petrol? We wouldn't do that. Now, if a person wants an electric car, they've got to pay for it just like anybody else. Now, I think it's the only way we can do it. And hopefully, if this is very successful, especially when all the elected members have got their electric car, we'll need more than one because there's 12 of us.
Okay, thank you. So all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. It's carried unanimously. Item 15, Alderman Zuko.
Yes, Lord Mayor. Look, this is the North Hobart parking operational policy changes.
Seconded
Move.
by Councillor Sherlock.
This has been through consultation through as far as I know, the traders and the residents in North Hobart. And this is actually something that's not just going to just benefit the traders. This is actually going to benefit the residents as well. I've been saying it for quite a long time. The car parking in North Hobart is not simply about the traders. I speak to a number of residents in North Hobart on a regular basis. They get sick and tired of people parking over their driveways and even in their driveways. And this, the line marking will overcome that. The sensors in the streets will overcome that. See, you know, some people may think, oh, my push for North Hobart in the car parking is just about the traders. It is not and has not been that, Lord Mayor, because I know what's been happening there. I know the poor residents. I know a couple of them rang me one night and said, I'm going to go and let the tyres down on the car that's just parked over my driveway. And I said, look, don't do that. Just call the police and that, or call the general manager. I normally annoy the general manager on weekends, 11 o'clock at night, and I get phone calls on a regular basis. Look, this is one way forward of looking at how we can appease and overcome some of the issues of North Hobart. The one thing that we've got to look at, and this is a reality, and I'm going to try and avoid using a particular name, but food service delivery vehicles, right? We need to get the state government to understand what they are doing, not just in North Hobart and the residents, but it's happening in Sandy Bay and other areas. And if our staff can continually lobby the Minister's office, because what you've got to look at is, and what you've got to understand is, could you imagine a row of taxis parked on the middle of Sandy Bay shopping strip or the North Hobart shopping strip? We would all jump up and down then. And that's the reality of these food delivery service vehicles. Right? They are unregulated. A lot of them don't care what they do and how they treat the residents or the business people. Yes, the other hand, we can get the business people can stop using them, but that's not going to work. Some form of regulation is required. It doesn't have to be anything over the top. You know, if a vehicle's got a sticker on it and it's a food delivery vehicle, then they cannot park on the street. And that's a very simple process. And hopefully the general manager and the staff can lobby that process. And that is a win situation, not only for traders, it's also a win situation for the residents. Because, you know, in particular with North Hobart, we've provided quite a number of places for these drivers to park, but yet they would rather park on the street. The other thing about the other change in this is the parking on Elizabeth Street in regards to charging between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. There was quite a bit of discussion in committee in regards to that. I was sort of more looking at 4:30, targeting the delivery service drivers, but also looking at things, and there was good discussion, and at the end of the day, it was all agreed by the committee between 5 and 8, so there was a little bit of compromise, and it was actually quite a good debate, and I actually mentioned that to the committee. I will say to all those elected members that were not part of this discussion that it was a very good, fruitful discussion that resulted in this recommendation, and I highly commend this for the council.
Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you. It's good you're getting some parking controls up there. Just a couple of questions, and I'm sorry, the answer could be in the report, which I haven't read, but so part one, does that return to the old, at the moment you get charged to 8 o'clock, don't you?
That's correct. Lord Mayor, at the moment it's from 8:30 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Right. Yeah, I think that's returning to what it used to be, which I think people will be delighted with.
That's correct.
Absolutely delighted with. However, we have parking attendants checking at 5 minutes to 9 if someone goes there at 6. Is there a cost-benefit analysis of having parking controls of 3 hours after 6 p.m? Just
I don't know what the question is. You're clear on the question, Mr. Carr?
I think I understand the
Oh,
question.
do you want me to just quickly? So, if your person turned up there at 6 p.m. and then wasn't away by 9 p.m.
So, Lord Mayor, the parking controls, 3P parking controls, anyone that arrived from 6 p.m. onwards the car could stay there all night.
Till 9 a.m.
Till the next morning.
So that reads wrong then, because it says with parking controls of 3 hours, is it?
The
What's
parking
3 p.m.?
the parking controls will cease
At 6 p.m.
So it'll be, but the 3-hour zone will still be enforced. So if you,
So they're free, but they'll be.
no, I need to go back on what I said initially. The 3-hour zone, they would have to vacate that zone.
So it's free for 3 hours, but if they were there at 6, they would have to leave before 9 or right on 9. And my question was, how cost effective is having parking people up there just before 9 to check that?
Lord Mayor, would probably need to take that on notice, and it's something that we will look at. And I think the recommendation 10 or 11 is to report back in June on the efficacy of these policy changes.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Parking on Elizabeth Street, Part 3, does that require parking meters to be installed?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and so I don't understand personally, if there's going to be parking meters installed, is the only reason that we have controls between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. is to discourage the short haulage, whatever they're called.
Food delivery service.
Food delivery services, yeah.
Lord Mayor, the timing of those paid periods directly correlates to peak usage. Now that isn't only social food delivery drivers, it's any driver, any commuter, anyone looking to shop, and turnover is important at those times so that everyone has equitable access to the retailers during those periods.
Okay, that's all the questions I have at present. Thank you.
Further discussion, Alderman Brackus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I'll echo what Alderman Zuko said. I think the discussion we had about this in committee was one of the more productive discussions that I think we've had in a while. I think it was an excellent discussion. There was a lot of good insights that came out of that. Look, I think the issue with parking in North Hobart is definitely a complex one. There's obviously the big ticket solutions, and then there's obviously the ones that I think call them low-hanging fruit, call them short and medium-term solutions. I think what's being put forward here is an excellent start. I think it puts us in the right direction, and I think it leaves us gives us a bit of wiggle room and a bit of time to resolve the longer-term issues. But I think, especially, what was originally proposed. We did get some feedback from the traders, and I think that feedback was largely taken on board. As Alderman Zuko said, there was a bit of back and forth as to what times were the most appropriate. But I think at the end of the day, what was put forward was, I don't want to say compromise, because I think a compromise suggests that one person's taken a hit or whatever. I think it was just generally it was a good productive discussion. Points out, and I think what came forward sort of best balance the different priorities of us putting those times in the city. So look, I'd heartily recommend this, and I'll be voting for it. And I think hopefully it's a step in the right direction for us easing some of the pressures in parking in North Hobart, whether it's for the residents or the traders or the patrons as well. I think this does definitely go in the right direction.
Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, I just asked questions before. Look, I'm thinking about it. I think we've got to get rid of the parking controller on Condell Place after 6 p.m. it will cause hassles. The few dollars that the council will earn through fines will just cause more hassles. So I think fair enough 3 hour time limit during the day is fine, but if it's free after 6 p.m, I think it makes sense to be free and time unlimited after 6 p.m. So I wonder if I could move an amendment to remove those words that indicate, or put words in that indicate that it's 6 p.m. After 6 p.m, it's unlimited time and free.
So that's in point one, is it?
Yeah, point one, yeah.
I don't understand that.
Oh, well, so just to explain it, so you turn up there at 6 p.m, right on 6 p.m, you don't have to, you're not charged.
6:01.
Yeah, that's what it says.
Yeah, but it's a 3 hour limit. So at 9 o'clock, you'll be fined if you stay over that. So presumably the little sensors in the ground would determine whether you've stayed over the limit, and you could be fined. Yeah.
Mr. Carr, would you like to clarify this? Because I think we want to be sure that we're not doing sort of changes without your advice on this.
Lord Mayor, by the letter of the law, the legislation, if you came at 5:59 or 6 o'clock and you parked in a 3 hour zone, you would have to vacate at 8:59, 9 o'clock and move on. But the parking controls then do stop from 9 p.m. And so to avoid any of that confusion, if you wanted to specify, or this is something that we would typically manage through leniency in enforcement. Alderman Briscoe is correct by the letter of the law, but from 9 p.m. it does become free. So if someone, I don't mean to go into detail, if someone came in at 6:02, they would be fine to stay. So if someone's watch is wrong, so it's a real technicality, but we would typically manage that through just.
Now I'm confused now. I'm like the deputy. So if I came in at 6.
No, if you came in at, Lord Mayor, may I assist? If you came in at 5:59 and you paid for 3 hours, is this correct, Mr. Carr? If you paid for 3 hours, you will have to vacate the car for 1 minute at 8:59, or else you could get booked between 8:59 and 9 o'clock. Correct, Mr. Carr?
By the letter of the law. You would only pay for the first minute, but by the letter of the law it says you must leave. So, but we would not issue an infringement on that basis.
But if you arrived at 6:01, and didn't pay, and you were there for 3 hours at 9:01, after 9 you can stay all night unlimited.
All right, I don't think my amendment is needed.
No, it's clarified now. Yeah, it's clarified now.
Right. So any further
So,
discussion?
because I'm still talking, Adam.
Further discussion?
He was saying sit down. I'm not going to sit down. So all I can say is it may be confusing the number 3 there, that where there's not clear, there'll have to be signs saying it's only charged between 11 a.m. and 2 a.m. and 5 p.m. and 3 p.m. Oh, sorry, and 8 p.m. So it could be confusing. So I hope the management of this is very lenient in the first, when it take a while to put the parking meters in. I presume that, is there a budget item to put parking meters in?
Lord Mayor, the funding for the parking meters will come out of the operational budget for this financial year.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So if there's no further, Alderman Thomas.
I can't resist it. I've been sitting here saying, don't start. Are we saying, I mean, people go to North Hobart to eat or go to the movies. Both of which activities, unless you go to Macca's, which doesn't exist in that particular street of Elizabeth Street, take more than 29 minutes. we've got the entire Elizabeth Street cut at 30 minutes and you can't feed your meter. So are we saying that everyone going to the movies and everyone going to a restaurant are going to be able to get a park in Condell Place or in a side street? Can I just ask that question?
Mr. Carr?
Lord Mayor, with the changes we're proposing, there will now be around 165 car parks with a 3-hour limit. The importance of having a half-hour limit on the high street is for the turnover and the high frequency and the convenience of those times, and managing the two, the on-street and the off-street, you're required to have a short on-street to push people into the off-street facilities.
I can accept the incentive factor, but what are the 30-minute people doing? Are they sort of running flat strap to pick up or just order and take a takeaway or going to the Renown for a bag of lollies, or what are they doing? Because half an hour isn't enough time to do anything in that area.
Lord Mayor, we have had consultation with the traders, and they're very happy with the 30 minutes. It has been 15 minutes for the best part of 12 months, which is very short. We put that in as part of our COVID measures. 30 minutes is considered even by the newsagents and the homewares retailers to be a sufficient amount of time. If we were to go back to what it was, which is essentially 30 minutes, maybe there was 1 or 2 1-hour parks on Elizabeth Street, but in that section. But even if they did exist, someone going to a movie couldn't park there because they would have to move their car after 1 hour. So we're being very generous in providing the parking in our 2 off-street facilities, which have been underutilised compared to Elizabeth Street. And so we do believe we've got capacity to move people into the off-street, and actually they're saving a lot of money by doing that.
Alderman Deputy Lord Mayor, did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I want to ask a couple of questions. Through you to Mr. Carr. Mr. Carr, just in relation to the average cost, I think you talked about 83 cents for people using the app.
Yes, through you, Lord Mayor, the $2 per hour cost on Elizabeth Street equals a real cost of $1 for half an hour. And the data we have today tells us the average stays are about 22 minutes. And if someone was using the Easy Park app, that would equate to only 83 cents.
Thank you. And I don't know if you know the answer to this, but the food delivery businesses, do you know what sort of average wage or payment they get? Because I wonder how successful this is really going to be if we're trying to move people on, and particularly them. So have you any idea if this is going to make their work even more marginal?
Lord Mayor, I don't have exact details, but I believe it's somewhere in the vicinity of $5 or $6 a delivery. But yes, certainly it would be a disincentive.
$5 or $6 a delivery. Ooh, gee. Okay. All right. Well, let's hope it is the disincentive that they require. Thank you. Look, I think we've come to a really, we've moved this discussion on quite a long way with the traders and probably residents alike. I don't just stand to talk for the Residents Association or anything like that, but perhaps this is a good compromise. We did talk a little bit at committee in relation to investing any sort of money that is raised in North Hobart back into North Hobart for any improvements. And whilst it was knocked back at the committee, I see that as a real benefit to perhaps the traders, to other upgrades that we might want to do in North Hobart. So I'll test the floor. and move that amendment again, that the money raised from the North Hobart parking will be invested back into amenity upgrades for the area. So I'll move that as an amendment.
I need a seconder for that. It's Councillor Sherlock. Okay,
Lord
Alderman,
Mayor, I want to speak against the amendment.
I think Councillor
Short
Harvey.
half
All right, you've got it.
Yeah, look, I'm not comfortable with the amendment at this point because I think you need to look at this holistically rather than just for North Hobart. So if there was going to be a benefit for fines or parking fees collected in a particular area, first we'd need a report to find out how this is going to work, what the implications are, and is this something that is broader than just North Hobart, and it might mean that South Hobart then all want parking meters as well. So it's a bit of a can of worms. So I'm happy to look at a report about, what's the title for this? Community...
Potential for...
Yeah, potential for community benefits associated with parking fees or something like that. But at this particular point, I don't want to support something that would push us towards doing something that I think at this stage is premature. So if your amendment was a report be prepared looking at models from around the world or from Australia that attributes parking fees and fines towards, I don't know, certain areas, I'd be a bit more comfortable, but I wouldn't want to do it straight away in North Hobart.
I'm happy to move that as for a further report into that. If Councillor Sherlock is happy with that.
It could probably just be added to the part 9 because there's a further report coming back anyway, so it could just be, and the potential
Is it a thing?
of a percentage of parking fees being invested in community infrastructure as well.
This is one of those situations on the fly. It was explained at committee that this could be actually detrimental to the whole of North Hobart. And I'll say this, if you're going to implement something that benefits one particular section of the city, it's detriment to the rest of the city. Back in the number of years ago, and General Manager, you can confirm or deny this, the parking fund, through your question, Lord Mayor, so my time stops, was the parking fund years ago that the entire parking fund for the city went into replacement of car parking or car parks for the city?
There was a provision in the Local Government Highways Act that required councils to reinvest parking money into the parking business. That provision was removed in 2005 following national competition policy.
Okay. Now, look, I think we're premature on that, and I would like, and the intent was at the committee when we had this discussion, was that let's see how this goes. These changes to North Hobart go first, and then when the report comes back in, I think it was 6 months' time, that's correct, Mr. Kari Singh, when the report comes back in 6 months, then we could consider another report on those lines, but not specific to North Hobart. Because if you're going to do it specific to North Hobart, to my point of view, you're actually you're giving a benefit to one particular shopping precinct. You're not going to give it to the same in Sandy Bay, South Hobart, or whatever have you. To me, if we're going to do parking revenue going back into something, I think it should be parking revenue across the board, and maybe what we should be looking at is reconsidering something in the similar lines that we had back when it was part of the Act. It's no longer part of the Act, and we should expand it even further and maybe look at it in a big picture rather than, I think the word before was micro used, because this is what we're doing here. We're using the micro system for North Hobart. I urge each and every councillor to leave it for 6 months. Let's see what comes back from North Hobart, what happens in North Hobart, and then give consideration to a bigger picture, not a micro picture.
Alderman Briscoe.
I agree totally with, I think the motivation, I totally agree with Alderman Zirko. The motivation by the deputy is good. But you would have to do an audit of how much the city spends in North Hobart anyway, and what's the revenue it gets through parking back to us. We are a city that we treat the revenue generated by the whole city for whole city purposes. And to say one particular suburb, the revenue generated in that suburb will be spent on that suburb is a dangerous precinct to go through, because you could extend it to Sandy Bay. The rates collected in Sandy Bay has to be spent on Sandy Bay, or the rates collected by Battery Point has to be spent on. All revenue collected by the city decisions are made around this table, not where it was collected from, but what needs there are. Now, if some of those things that are being suggested tonight, there'll be more money going into North Hobart than generated by North Hobart. And do we really want an audit of what the revenue and what's the expense of each suburb? I don't think we do. We prioritise what projects are good for the city. Now, as I said, the intent, I'm pretty sure, it was good from the deputy, so I'm not voting against it because the intent was. I think it's a road that if we start travelling along, where does it end? So that's my objection to the amendment.
Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I think I agree with all three of the speakers on this. I do think this is a bit, I don't think this is the right time to be considering this at all, for starters, but I think at the same time, and Alderman Briscoe made a point that I was going to raise myself, if we, rather than looking at it on a sector-by-sector basis, as Alderman Zuko was suggesting, which is one way we could go about looking at the funding, but as has been done in the past, but to do it, that all money raised in North Hobart in parking is going to be reinvested in North Hobart, then people in the city will be saying, oh well, there's so much parking money is generated within the CBD. Why shouldn't all that money be reinvested purely in the CBD? And Sandy Bay will say the same thing. And I think it's especially when you have areas where it's completely free parking, where it's going to end up at the point if every neighbourhood or every locality is saying that any money that we raise in our area should only be invested in our area. What about places in such as Lena Valley that doesn't have parking meters in the majority of those areas? If they're not raising any parking, how are we going to fund those? How are we going to fund those infrastructure investments? So look, I think once again, not as Alderman Briscoe said, not questioning the intent, but I'm just not sure if it's the right way of going about it, and also the right timing for it. And I'll make the other point. I'm not putting my name to endorsing, pulling funding away for something, as we heard in the special committee just earlier on. The issue of, the plan for North Hobart isn't something with which the council has resolved or has brought agreement on. I'm not really comfortable endorsing us setting money aside for something that I haven't agreed to or the council hasn't agreed to yet. I think it's not the right time to be doing it. It's something maybe to consider in the future, but I think we need to be careful about how it's done, because I think limiting the investment in those areas to where that money's been raised, I think is a bit of a slippery slope, as Alderman Briscoe said.
On the amendment, I'm going to support the amendment because I think it's an excellent idea to get some advice. It'll be read out to us again before we vote on it, but I think the Deputy's amendment is for the further report in 6 months' time to provide advice on the potential of a percentage of the parking fees to be reinvested in community infrastructure. So it's still 6 months away. It gives a signal to the staff that we want some advice on this. They might come back and say, reinvesting 20% for the inconvenience for traders of having paid parking in their precinct. There's something that goes back to that precinct for the streetscape upgrades, etc., etc. Or they might come back to us and say, no, bad idea. But all the Deputy's amendment is proposing is a further report, further advice. And I think it's important further advice because this is happening in many other places, and this is a way that councils can invest collect resources, and in some ways reinvest in a community that is having the disbenefit of having some of those elements of paid parking, but they can see that the benefits are going into funding things in their community. This is not new. Not only is this happening around the world, but this is happening in Hobart. This council approved doing this in the Domain. So the Domain car parking meters already reinvest the money that's collected on the Domain into the Domain. So we already do this, and all this amendment is suggesting is that we get further advice on whether this is appropriate. And the advice might come back and say, no, bad idea, but the advice might come back and say, this is worth thinking about. So I'm just not sure why people wouldn't want to answer this question. All the concerns raised will be in the report. We're not moving to anything in particular, we're just seeking advice, and I see nothing to fear in getting that information.
A question, Lord Mayor, to you. If it does get incorporated as an amendment in the motion, can you consider as a point 10 and have it a separate vote on it? Because I personally would have to vote against the whole motion, which I don't want to, if that amendment is...
It's really up to the mover and the seconder.
No, it's up to Chair, I think, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So if the amendment does get included in a vote in the moment, we'll know.
Okay.
Then that part of the motion gets voted on separately.
Report just on that particular section. Okay.
Voted separately, because I don't want to vote against the rest of it.
All right. Are you happy with that? Yep. Okay. All right. Councillor Coates.
Look, just speak very briefly. I mean, I can see the intent. I guess, you know, in a very broad sense, we already spend all the money that's raised. So, you know, if we then direct it back into one area, it's presumably going to miss from somewhere else. But I guess more, speaking about this, I mean, look, this is an operational change to alleviate some current congestion, for lack of better wording, up in North Hobart. You know, part of it is to have a report to come back to then look at the operational impact of this. And to my mind, by having then extra stuff as part of it in terms of the amount of revenue that's raised and the amount of revenue that gets spent and is it gets spent in the right area, it muddies our decision in 6 months' time when we're trying to assess whether from an operational point of view to alleviate the you know, genuine issues at the moment in North Hobart was good or not. And look, you know, I think everyone's sort of spoken a little bit about this, but if you were to go down this path, I think it almost needs to be a separate, holistic view for the whole city, for South Hobart, Sandy Bay, North Hobart, Lena Valley, all the little retail shopping precincts. And look, you know, I think local residents might be surprised if they think, oh, all the revenue gets raised from these paid metered spots outside my homes and businesses doesn't go back into my local area. You know, most people assume it already does to an extent. But I just think in terms of the operational change that we're proposing here, and in us making a good, clear decision and assessment in 6 months' time, I just think this will muddy the waters a little bit. And in this instance, you know, it's all about trying to make the parking situation and the trading situation in North Hobart as best as possible. And while I can appreciate the intent, I just think this would potentially muddy that decision.
Okay, so Councillor Delta.
It's just a question, Lord Mayor, through you. With regards to the suburb you mentioned that we're already charging, what was the rationale behind that? Yeah.
The rationale behind it was that we had an approved Queen's Domain management plan with a whole series of actions in it, including introducing paid parking on the Queen's Domain. And the council made a decision at that point in time that they would use the revenue from car parking to fund the council-approved management plan for Queen's Domain. So that was the rationale at that time. That's what we've been doing for 6, 7 years.
Thank you for the clarification, and I wasn't aware of that, but thank you for that. Now, for me, there's only one issue in here, and the issue is very simple. I think both sides of the debate has made some very good points. At the end of this discussion, it's only a matter of report. And as in the past, we have supported, it's only a report, therefore, you know, we're not making any decision. It'll enlighten us, it'll give us more information, and then we'll be in a better position. So if it's a report, I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
So So this is, I might get it read out again. This will be a separate new item 10. Mr. Jackson, have you got the wording of it?
Yes, Lord Mayor. A further report be provided in June 2021 that considers that money raised for North Hobart parking charges be invested into amenity upgrades to the area of North Hobart.
Okay.
Lord Mayor, could I make a suggestion? This might maybe be better as a foreshadowed motion rather than adding it on to this.
I don't think so. I think it's this.
Other than number 11?
What Councillor Coates said was valid, wasn't it?
So I'm going to take them separately as requested.
No, 10 has to be taken as an amendment first, but when the full motion comes, then you take it.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Thank
All
you.
right. So we'll do the amendment and then we'll go back to Alderman Zuko to wrap up on the substantive motion.
Lord Mayor, I'm concerned that if it does pass, then it'll encourage people to vote against the whole motion.
No,
Because it'll be included. It's a separate, it's completely separate.
Yeah.
It won't be included. It won't be included in the substantial motion. Okay.
Okay. All right. So, all those in favour of the new item 10 amendment from Deputy Lord Mayor, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Show of hands. All those in favour?
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Ewan, Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
Against?
Alderman Zuko, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe.
Okay. Now, Alderman Zuko, if you'd like to sum up them.
Well, I can't sum up very quickly, Lord Mayor. I've got to say... Sorry.
The result is...
That can be 5-4, 11 or 6.
6-5, Lord Mayor.
Okay. Alderman Zuko.
Yes, Lord Mayor. There was comments made in regards to the hourly rate or wages in regards to food delivery operators, the people, which is totally absolutely irrelevant, Lord Mayor. It's not our concern how much the traders make or how much a delivery driver makes or how much anybody makes. I've got to say I'm actually quite disappointed that the amendment got through. I think that's going to be detrimental to us in general, because if I was a trader in the CBD right now, Lord Mayor, I'd be jumping up and down saying, well, all the car parking funds that are generated in the CBD, which is absolutely massive, should be spent back into the CBD. And have a guess what? You never know, there might be a notice of motion coming forward. I'm closing debate.
I can do a point of clarification, even while you're following.
Closing debate. Lord Mayor, so there could be a notice of motion that might come forward, Lord Mayor, that all funds generated from car parking in the CBD get spent in the CBD, and see how detrimental that's going to be not only for the traders of our city, but also the residents of our city who benefit from the amount of funds generated by this city in car parking and fines that underwrites the rate base. You need to understand how much money is generated and how much that in turn goes into the rate base to reduce the rates for our ratepayers. Now I will see the challenge when someone puts a notice of motion up to seek a report on that basis to see if we all support it just like we did now, because it's only a report. I've got to say, I don't think we really gave that a very good thought. But anyway, what do I know? I haven't been in business for 50 years for nothing. But anyway, Lord Mayor, in general, the main component of this motion is absolutely something I support, and I've been arguing for years about. It's been 15 years now, Alderman Barakis, about the parking situation in North Hobart. This one here is one that not only assists the traders but also assists the residents. And hopefully, when the report comes back in 6 months, we can see what effects, what benefits have come forward from these changes. Because these were basically operational changes
30
until
seconds.
such time it was hijacked.
Okay, I'm going to put items 1 to 9 of the motion for starters. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. It's carried unanimously. And I'll put item 10 of the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
No.
All those in favour.
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Ewan, Deputy Lord Mayor and Lord Mayor.
Against.
Alderman Zuko, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe.
Carried, Lord Mayor, 6 votes for 5.
Moving on now to item 16.
Yeah, council policy review, Lord Mayor, so move.
Lord Mayor, any discussion? No discussion. Put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 18.
Item 17.
Oh, 17. I think that was deferred.
Yeah, I have to move that. Yeah, so this is the North Hobart Retail and Entertainment Precinct Plan Vision and Access and Parking Plan project. So it's to be that the item be withdrawn from the agenda.
Second.
It's deferred at committee.
Seconded by Councillor Harvey. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 18. Special report from the General Manager. Would you like to speak to this General Manager?
Nomination to attend the awards from the council, Lord Mayor.
A question.
Alderman Briscoe.
So we're a finalist. There's no guarantee we have a winning position. Will there be any officers attending?
My understanding is that there will be an officer attending, yes.
Has someone moved the... I'm happy, well, what my view is that we don't send an elected member. Did you say the officer will be attending? Will not be attending?
Understanding that the officer will be attending.
Will be attending. So we've got a representative there. I think in the current climate of budget restraint and cutbacks, I think it's showing good governance. We've already got a representative to pick up the award if we get an award, and then it will be presented to council here, presumably by the officer on behalf of the officer who attended. So I don't know whether I can move that we. Oh yeah, all right. I move that we don't send an elected member in because we have an officer attending.
Okay, so that's moved by Alderman Briscoe, seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yeah, and Lord Mayor, look, I agree. I think whilst it's good to go to these things, and I did attend the one just within walking distance rather than in Canberra, and where we won a state award, and I was really proud to be there with Boshra from Community Development, who was representing that part of council, whatever it's called now, City Life, is it? Community Life, sorry. And obviously the work that mainly the council officers did on behalf of the council with the community, some fantastic outcomes, some fantastic community art, as you would have seen in this report. So really proud that we have won this award, or won the state award for this, and I wish us well for the national award.
Councillor Harvey.
Lord Mayor, I think there's a triple irony in this. We've won an award for resilience for a program.
Oh, we're fine.
We're finalists. So we won the Tasmanian award, and we've made the final. So we've shown what a resilient council we are, and how we can put together a program that helps us to respond to a major weather event in 2018. And now we're in the middle of we're not luckily, but there's still this COVID pandemic, which is now reaching 60 million people around the world. We've been travelling quite well. So there's the resilience that we have in Hobart and Tasmania with regard to how we've handled the COVID-19 emergency. So I would be happy for one of our councillors to go to Canberra to represent this city in this major award. So I won't support the motion. I'm happy to have someone go. And if it's got to be, if I wanted to nominate someone, it would be Councillor Sherlock as the chair of the city, what do we call it? Community Life. Community Life Division. So if the motion doesn't get up, I will nominate Councillor Sherlock if she's prepared to go to Canberra and potentially receive a award that I think is a bit of a milestone for how Hobart handled a disaster in 2018.
Okay. Alderman Zucker.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, I don't care which, if a going to be elected member goes, I don't care who goes. But I think it's absolutely waste of time, waste of money, sending a staff member and a elected official, because irrespective which bundle it comes out of, it still comes out of the rate base. Now, if we're going to send an elected member, we don't send a staffer. I know we can't direct the general manager what to do and what not to do, but I think it's ludicrous. All the person's got to do, whether it's a staffer or an elected member, is to walk on stage, get the award, say thank you very much to a group of people, and fly back and spend $2,000. Please, that's going to be $4,000. I'm sorry. Now, let's make a decision here, right? That maybe the best solution for us to do is that the amendment should be, if the general manager sends a staffer, no elected official goes. If the general manager does not send a staffer, whoever the elected official that we decide goes. So that way the general manager can make a decision. If he doesn't send a staffer, an elected member goes. If he sends a staffer, the council says we're not sending an elected member.
It may not be an option.
No, it is an option. We can make that option.
But let's vote on the other one.
First.
Look, I think. Oh, sorry.
So I'm going to move an amendment that the council will send an elected member on the basis that no staffer is going.
I think that might be a foreshadowed.
Well, that's foreshadowed, okay? That way there we can send one, not two.
General Manager's request to clarify something.
No, I don't care about no one.
Which might assist the debate, Lord Mayor. The report does say that the staff member, who I alluded to was going, is actually paid for by the Australian Institute for Disaster Resilience. So the staff member's costs are borne by the organisation.
Well, I'll withdraw that. I didn't catch that either.
Councillor Sherlock.
Yeah, look, the GM just said what I wanted to stand up and actually say. And number two, I do actually agree with Alderman Zucker on this occasion. I think.
You don't want to go.
Councillor Dutta, did you still want to speak? Councillor Dutta, you raised your hand before.
Thank you, Chair. No, I was just going to make the point because I read that in the report. That's all. Thank you. Yeah.
Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Then just briefly, I'll agree with Alderman Briscoe and the Deputy Lord Mayor. I think it's a great recognition of how we managed the floods that we've been nominated for this award. But I think at the same time, as Councillor Harvey said, we've won an award for our resilience, and I think part of our resilience in this particular instance has been our proactiveness in redirecting resources where they need to be redirected and cutting that sort of extraneous expenditure. My understanding is, from memory, we did make a resolution that we weren't going to be conducting any travel, and I think yes, it's great we've won this award, but I'm not sure that it would send the right message to the public that we're spending money, as Alderman Zucker said, for somebody to fly up, say thank you very much, and then get back on the plane. I'm not sure that there's people that are still having still going through hard times. I think it's starting to ease off now, but I think this is a situation that's going to be lasting for a while. And I'm not sure it's going to reflect very well on the council if we're flying around, picking up certificates and flying back home. So look, if the cost of the staff member flying up is being borne by someone other than the ratepayer, there's no reason not to send them, but I think it'd be excessive and irresponsible for us to be paying for an elected member to be going.
Okay, so if there's no further discussion, the motion before us is from Alderman Briscoe, seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor, that we do not send an elected member to this ceremony. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. We'll move, if someone could move to us motion that we move to this closed portion, moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Councillor Ewan. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried unanimously. So we'll say good night to anyone who is listening and